The hypothesis of conflict between modern humans and Neanderthals has been a point of contention in paleo-anthropology, because no Neanderthal with arrows sticking out of his body has ever been discovered. However, we have the next best thing: a Neanderthal skeleton with an injury caused by a small, very sharp projectile weapon. The Neanderthal, who would become known as Shanidar III, is estimated to have died between approximately 50,000 and 45,000 years ago. This time frame is based on radiocarbon dating of charcoal samples from the same stratigraphic layer where his remains were found, which yielded uncalibrated dates between 46,900 plus or minus 1,500 years and 50,600 plus or minus 3,000 years before present. These dates place Shanidar III among the more recent Neanderthal individuals at the site. While the exact moment of his death cannot be pinpointed due to the limitations of dating methods and the context of the find, the evidence suggests he lived and died during this period, succumbing to complications from the stab wound to his left ninth rib, which showed signs of healing for several weeks prior to his death. Shanidar III was born into a world of struggle, where survival demanded resilience, intelligence, and an ability to endure pain that few today could fathom. His childhood was not an easy one. His bones, long buried in the cold embrace of the earth, tell a story of hardship and perseverance. Unlike some of his kin, who may have grown up strong and relatively unscathed, Shanidar III bore the marks of a life that tested him from an early age. Even now, thousands of years later, his silent remains challenge us to ask the unanswerable. What truly happened to Shanidar III? And what does his death tell us about the final days of his kind? Scars on his skeleton indicate that he suffered a severe injury to his right foot, likely as a young adult. Imagine him hobbling after his hunting party, forced to rely more on strategy than speed. Did he learn to adapt, becoming a master of ambush tactics, waiting in silence while his prey moved closer? Or did he rely on his comrades, forming bonds through necessity as they helped him secure food despite his limitations? His body suggests he endured the injury long enough for it to heal, a testament to the care of his community or his own remarkable will to survive. Indeed, Shanidar III knew pain as an old companion, a relentless shadow that never left his side. From the moment he limped out of his clan's rock shelter each morning, his injured foot reminded him that he was weaker than the others. In his youth, he had moved through the mountains like the wind, strong and sure-footed, capable of felling a deer with a single well-placed strike. But that time had long passed. His foot, shattered in some long-ago accident or perhaps by the crushing weight of a misstep on treacherous rock, had never healed correctly. Now, at age 45, he moved slower, his steps uneven, each one a battle against the unyielding earth beneath him. The Zagros Mountains during this period were not kind. The winter air cut like a knife in winter, and the summers baked the rock until the ground cracked. The caves and narrow passes had long been his home, but he could feel something changing. The air smelled of strangers. Their scent was unfamiliar, neither predator nor prey, something else entirely, and the whispers of danger had reached his ears from others who roamed farther than he did. At first it was just rumours. Shadows glimpsed between the trees, strange prints in the soft earth near watering holes. Then, one by one, his kind began to disappear. The old man who had once taught him to shape stone, gone. The woman whose laughter echoed in the valley, silent. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just absence. Shanidar III and his kin had always been hunters, but now they felt like the hunted. The first time he saw them, he thought they were ghosts. These creatures were different from him, taller, leaner, their movements eerily swift. They carried weapons unlike anything he had ever seen. Not the thick, heavy spears of his people, made for brutal close-quarters combat, but long, slender shafts with wickedly sharp tips. These men did not fight like Neanderthals. They did not face their prey head-on with the strength of their arms. No, they killed from afar, striking without warning, vanishing before their enemy could even see the death that had come for them. Shanidar III had fought many times before. He had felt the hot splash of blood on his hands, had wrestled beasts to the ground with nothing but his wits and his will. He knew the taste of desperation, the edge of survival that separated the living from the dead. But nothing had prepared him for this. The first spear came from nowhere, whistling through the cold morning air, embedding itself in the rock beside him with a sharp crack. He turned, heart pounding, eyes scanning the ridgeline, but there was nothing. Just the wind, the empty silence of the highlands. Then the second spear struck. It was not a fatal blow. The sharp point sliced through his ribs, a flash of searing pain stealing his breath. He stumbled, his foot failing him, his hands grasping at the wound. He saw red pooling in his palm, felt the cold creeping into his limbs. He knew he had only moments before the intruders struck again. With the last of his strength, he threw himself toward the shelter of the rocks, crawling through the snow, leaving behind a trail of his own life, his red blood standing out in the white landscape. The hunt was over. The prey had been marked, and Shanidar III knew he may not see another sunrise. Despite his resilience, fate was not kind to him. The world he lived in was changing, and dangers lurked not only among the predators of the wilderness, but within the shifting tides of human migration. In the Levant, to the west of his homeland of the Zagros Mountains, a new kind of human was emerging. They were not Neanderthals, but modern humans, Homo sapiens, and with them came a deadly innovation, the Neronian blade. Ksar Akil is an archaeological site located in coastal Levant in the Antilles Valley. It's a rock shelter that has provided one of the most significant sequences of human occupation in the eastern Mediterranean during the Middle Paleolithic, roughly 50,000 years ago. The site is particularly renowned for its evidence of the transition from Neanderthal-associated cultures to those of modern humans, including tool industries with small pointed tools that bear a striking resemblance to the Neronian spear points from Grot Mandrin. These blades exhibit standardized morphologies, suggesting a sophisticated understanding of lithic reduction sequences. The technological attributes of these blades bear a striking resemblance to the Neronian industry identified in the Middle Rhône Valley of France, indicating cultural exchanges or parallel technological developments between these regions. The technological parallels between the Levantine blade industries and contemporaneous European industries, such as the Neronian, suggest multiple waves of human expansion out of the Levant into Europe. These migrations facilitated the exchange of technological innovations and contributed to the cultural mosaic of Upper Paleolithic societies. The Neronian tradition represented a technological leap. Unlike the large, heavy Musterian points that Shanidar III and his kin used for close-range thrusting, the Neronian blades were smaller, sharper, and made for projectiles. These weapons, crafted by modern humans, were used with spears thrown from a distance, using atlatls, devices that extended the thrower's reach and power. They were faster, deadlier, and required less brute strength to wield. But were these weapons the reason for Shanidar III's demise? Scholars have debated the origins of this wound. Some suggest it could have come from a hunting accident, perhaps a misplaced strike from a fellow Neanderthal's spear during a chaotic encounter with prey. But others point to a darker possibility. Could Shanidar III have been one of the first known victims of human-on-Neanderthal conflict, caught in a clash between Neanderthals and the encroaching modern humans? If so, the weapon that struck him was an early form of long-range projectile technology, distinct from the short-range throwing and thrusting spears of his own clan. Indeed, new DNA analysis has determined more precisely than ever the time period during which Neanderthals interbred with modern humans in the Middle East, probably in the Zagros Mountains region, starting about 50,000 years ago and lasting about 7,000 years, until Neanderthals began to disappear from the fossil record. Ironically, the Shanidar Neanderthal shows signs that they were more sapienized than other Neanderthal populations, such as more rounded brain cases and smaller brow ridges, most likely due to interbreeding, but we cannot say for certain just how much sapiens DNA these Neanderthals had. However, their disappearance may not have been a simple matter of replacement and assimilation. There is emerging evidence of conflict between the two populations. The evidence rests in the ribcage of Shanidar III. Among the remains of his battered skeleton, archaeologists found a wound that speaks of violence, a puncture wound to the left ninth rib. Not a crushing blow, not a simple break from a fall, but a precise wound made by something sharp and deliberate. The point struck at higher velocity, as a low-speed thrust would have shattered the rib more extensively. Another clue was the angle of the wound. The spear that nicked his ninth left rib entered his body at about 45 degrees downward angle, which is consistent with the ballistic trajectory of a thrown weapon. A recent study used microscopic wear analysis and experimental archaeology to argue these points were hafted onto shafts and propelled by bow or atlatl or spear thrower, though direct evidence of such weapons is absent. Their small size and precision imply a high-velocity delivery system optimized for distance and penetration rather than brute force. The Neronian spear points represent a technological leap brought by modern humans migrating into the Levant. To assess whether a Neronian spear point could align with Shanidar III's injury as a weapon, we need to compare their wounding potential and context. Shanidar III's rib injury shows a clean cut with minimal fracturing, suggesting a sharp, relatively small point entering at a shallow angle and high velocity. Neronian points, being small and light, are designed for deep penetration at higher speeds. A spear thrown with such a tip, especially if atlatl assisted, would pierce soft tissue effectively and cause a narrow, deep wound with little rib fragmentation if striking bone directly, due to lesser kinetic energy. Shanidar III's wound's partial healing and lack of extensive shattering lean towards such a higher velocity impact, consistent with the Neronian design. The Mousterian points. Neanderthals used at Shanidar and elsewhere are not a good match for the injury's characteristics. Too broad to cut the rib without excessive force. Neronian points, while lethal, are optimized for a long-range delivery system, suggesting a match in wound signature, especially if thrown by hand rather than with a bow or atlatl. Unlike the healed injuries he had suffered earlier in life, this one tells a different tale. The bone had begun to heal, suggesting he survived for weeks, perhaps months, after the injury. What happened to him in those final days? Did he spend his last moments in agony, tended to by his kin in the dim light of Shanidar cave, or did he struggle alone, dying from an unseen attacker's blow? The arrival of modern humans in the region is estimated to have begun around 50,000 years ago, placing their presence suspiciously close to the time of Shanidar III's death. Could his wound be evidence of conflict between modern humans, armed with high-technology long-range weapons, and Neanderthals with short-range weapons? Imagine the moment. A silent figure lurking in the underbrush, watching as Shanidar III moved through the landscape. The attacker, armed with a light, deadly spear tipped with a Neronian blade, let it fly. It struck its target, not a fatal blow, but one that would set in motion a slow and inevitable decline. Shanidar III, perhaps confused and bleeding, made his way back to his people, nursing a wound that would not heal. Someone removed the spear along with the blade because no spear point was found sticking out of the wound. Shanidar Cave's very large size, over 1,000 square meters or over 10,000 square feet, and natural shelter could support prolonged stays, protecting against weather and predators. Its strategic overlook of the Zab Valley might suggest a base for monitoring game year-round. Isotopic studies of Neanderthal teeth elsewhere support such mobility, though Shanidar Cave's specific data is lacking. Repeated burials and tool deposits suggest Shanidar Cave wasn't a one-off stop, but a recurring base, potentially used for weeks or months annually. It may have been a hub in a broader seasonal round, with Neanderthals wintering in lower valleys. Seasonal prey patterns, limited hearths, and a mobile Neanderthal lifestyle point to Shanidar Cave as a seasonal camp occupied in warmer months when hunting was optimal. The cave's harsh winter conditions and sparse cold season resources make year-round living less practical. The Zagros, at 50,000 years ago, featured a mix of montane steppe, open woodland and river valleys, with cooler, drier conditions than today. Shanidar Cave's high elevation of 700 meters, 2,300 feet, repeated burials and tool deposits suggest Shanidar Cave wasn't a one-off stop, but a recurring base, potentially used for weeks or months annually. It may have been a hub in a broader seasonal round, with Neanderthals wintering in lower valleys. Neanderthals are generally seen as mobile hunter-gatherers, tracking game across territories rather than settling permanently. Shanidar's position in the Zagros, a corridor between plains and mountains, suggests a seasonal hunting circuit, lowlands in winter, uplands like Shanidar Cave in summer. Neanderthals hunted everything they could catch and kill. Wild goats, the ancestors of the Persian ibex, were agile ungulates and thrived on steep cliffs and were a staple for Neanderthals. Shanidar Cave's faunal remains include numerous goat bones, suggesting targeted hunting with spears. Red deer was found in wooded valleys and offered substantial meat and hides. Their bones appear in Shanidar's assemblages, indicating seasonal exploitation. Wild boar was present in lower, brushy areas near rivers. Boars provided a high-fat resource. Evidence from Shanidar includes boar remains, suggesting opportunistic hunting. Aurochs were large wild cattle that roamed open plains below the mountains. Their size made them a high-value target, though less common in Shanidar's record due to the effort required. What else have scientists learned about Shanidar 3? Neanderthals that interbred with modern humans around this time passed down some important genes that allowed modern humans to thrive in colder regions, especially for metabolism and pigmentation. Neanderthals had genes for lighter pigmentation, including skin, hair and eyes, which they evolved over their 500,000 years of existence in a northern climate. You can disregard any earlier studies that suggested blue eyes and light skin only evolved more recently, as those estimates were based on incomplete data. Blue eyes, blonde and red hair, freckles and a reduced ability to tan in Europeans all come from Neanderthal gene variants. In fact, a recent study concluded that blue eyes originated around 42,000 years ago in the nearby Caucasus region. So, Shanidar 3 probably had lighter skin pigmentation, blue or brown eyes and sandy blonde hair, and his Neanderthal brothers and sisters passed down those genes to modern humans. This isn't some Eurocentric propaganda, this is genetic fact. Neanderthals also passed down genes for increased height, higher bone density, and higher levels of testosterone. One modern human mandible from Romania, known as Oase-1, dated to around 40,000 years ago, has nearly 10% Neanderthal DNA from interbreeding that occurred only 150 years prior. Oase-1 has large tracts of Neanderthal DNA in genes related to pigmentation and other traits. Maybe his ancestors met Shanidar 3's relatives while passing through the Zagros Mountains on their way to Europe. Indeed, Shanidar 3 is estimated to have been taller than your average Neanderthal, about 1.69 meters tall, which translates to approximately 5 feet 6 inches. This estimation comes from the analysis of his skeletal remains, particularly the length and proportions of his bones, conducted by scientists studying his fossils. He also would have taken pride in his appearance, keeping his hair tied back and his clothing in good repair, unlike the usual depictions of his kind as savage brutes. He would have spent much of his time hunting, sharpening his weapons and tools, making fires and distilling birch bark and pine tar for use in a multitude of applications. Meanwhile, the women of his tribe made fur clothing and jewelry, collected plants and herbs, hunted small game such as birds and rabbits, cooked and took care of the men and children, although the men and women likely shared some of these tasks. The Shanidar Cave is famous for yielding several Neanderthal skeletons, with injuries ranging from fractured skulls to broken arms and legs. Survival of individuals with debilitating injuries implies a high level of group support, a key insight into Neanderthal social behavior. The Shanidar 3 Neanderthal specimen has also provided profound insights into Neanderthal anatomy and adaptability. Recent virtual reconstructions of Shanidar 3's ribcage have unveiled distinctive features that challenge previous assumptions about Neanderthal physiology and their environmental adaptations. Shanidar 3 is among the rare Neanderthal fossils with a relatively complete and well-preserved ribcage, offering a unique opportunity to study thoracic morphology. Advanced CT scanning and geometric morphometric analyses revealed that Shanidar 3 possessed a bell-shaped thorax, characterized by longer and more horizontally oriented ribs compared to modern humans. Traditionally, the robust build and expansive rib cages of Neanderthals have been interpreted as adaptations to cold climates, aiding in thermoregulation. However, the discovery of similar features in Shanidar 3 and Kibara 2, both from regions with relatively mild climates, challenges this notion. These findings imply that the Neanderthal ribcage morphology was not exclusively a cold climate adaptation, but rather a general characteristic of the species, irrespective of environmental conditions. When compared to modern human samples from different backgrounds, Shanidar 3 and Kibara 2's ribcages clustered separately, showing closer resemblance to cold-adapted modern humans. This observation suggests that while Neanderthals shared certain anatomical traits with cold-adapted modern humans, their ribcage structure was a consistent species-wide trait rather than a specialized adaptation. So, the virtual reconstruction of Shanidar 3's ribcage provides valuable insights into Neanderthal anatomy, physiology, and adaptability. The bell-shaped thorax and expanded lower ribcage suggest a larger respiratory capacity, potentially linked to dietary and activity-related factors. Moreover, the presence of these features in Neanderthals from diverse climatic regions challenges the traditional view of their anatomy as solely cold-adaptive, indicating a more generalized physiological trait across the species. Nevertheless, Shanidar 3's story remains incomplete, a puzzle missing its final pieces. Yet his left ninth rib, with its jagged wound, speaks louder than words. His bones preserve the mystery of a life lived in struggle and a death that hints at a changing world. Another male Shanidar Neanderthal, known as Shanidar 1, who died around the age of 40, about 55,000 years ago, suffered from a withered right arm and 2 broken legs, but also managed to survive to an advanced age. In the end, Shanidar 3 was laid to rest in Shanidar Cave, where his bones would remain undisturbed for tens of thousands of years. His burial suggests that his people cared for their dead, that they took time to place him in the earth, rather than leave him to the scavengers. Did they mark his grave with stories, warning the younger ones to be wary of the dangers beyond the cave's sheltering walls and the strangers down in the valley? Let us know what you think in the comments, and please subscribe to the channel for updates.